Welcome to my entirely too ambitious TBR for the Bloomin readathon. Do you all remember last year when I thought that I had read only 98 books in the year in attempt to read 100, but in fact I had read 99? I was so close, so close. Currently, we are only at 58 and it is now November. And so for the Bloomin readathon, my Super Bowl of the year, we have a TBR of more books than exist spaces on the bingo board. Hello, my name is Meekela, it's Meekela Reads, I live here. This is my second year participating in the Bloomin readathon, and I am so very excited. If you don't know, the Bloomin readathon is a readathon that is hosted by Alison from Alison Pages and Kirsty from Kirsty, and we follow, like most great readathons, a bingo board. There are many spaces, many prompts, as you can see, and I have hand curated more than one book for each prompt for this year's TBR. So I have a lot of books to talk about. Without further ado, let's just get into it, because otherwise I will be here all night. The first prompt is The Bee Space, and this is a book that has a lot of buzz, which means it's very popular. For this, I have selected Garlic and the Vampire by Bree Paulson. I spoke about this in my last video. This is a graphic novel. We follow Garlic. Garlic lives in a village full of vegetable people. She is just living her best life, tending to her garden, doing her own thing, when suddenly a vampire moves into the castle on the hill. The vegetable people of the village ask Garlic to go and confront the vampire. It's super short. It's been making the rounds. Everyone loves it. It sounds like a lovely, cozy time. And like I said, I love me some sentient vegetables. The next prompt is Cloud, and this is a book that you assume will make you emotional. For this one, I have picked Before We Say Goodbye by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is the fourth book in the Before the Coffee Gets Cold series. In this, we follow an unassuming but somewhat popular cafe in Tokyo that allows its patrons to travel back in time. However, there are rules that go along with this, and one of them is that you must return before your coffee gets cold. In these books, we follow typically 4 short stories that really center on the guests of the cafe, but also tell a really, really lovely story about the people who work at the cafe. In the last one, we got to explore some different areas of Japan, and so I don't know where this one's going to take us, but I'm excited, and I assume that I'm going to be quite moved, because that's typically what these books do. Next, we have The Sun Space, which is a happy book. It's literally in the title. Happy Place is by Emily Henry. She is one of the queens of contemporary romance, and I believe this one was released end of last year, start of this year, and I still haven't read it. We follow Harriet and Wynne, who are a couple who were together, but they haven't told their friends yet, and then they embark on a holiday with their friends for a bit of a last hurrah before their cottage gets sold, and they have to pretend that they are still together because, like I said, they haven't told them that they're separated. I think this is a second chance romance, which isn't my favorite trope, but it could be converted. We could like it, who knows? And then, the opposite to The Sun Space, we have The Moon Space, and this is a book that takes place outside the country that you live in, because we all live under the same moon and the same stars. For this one, I have picked Bunny by Mona Awad, which could also work for the B space, but we're going to use it for this space. This is a weird and quite twisty dark academia book, I think, and I'm at least 50 pages into it already, and I still don't know what's happening. We follow Samantha, who is attending a college. It is Warren University. I don't know what country this is set in, but it's definitely not mine, so that's why it fits for this space. In her writing class, Samantha has these 4 other girls, and she absolutely despises them. They all are quite pristine and proper and refer to each other as Bunny all the time. She hates it, but then everything changes when she is actually invited to their little closed group, their little sleepover slumber party, if you will, and I think she gets drawn in. We're not there yet where I'm up to, but I'm assuming that that's what happens. Like I said, I've already started this. It's a bit of a wild ride. I have no idea what's happening, and to be honest, I'm perfectly okay with that. Next, we have The Tree Space, which is the space in which you read a non-fiction book. Now, in making this list, I have lots of non-fiction books, but for The Tree Space specifically, I have picked Unmasking Autism by Devon Price. This is a non-fiction, obviously, that follows the experiences of autistic people across the spectrum and their experiences of masking and how exhausting and sometimes really, really quite difficult this can be. The author, Dr. Devon Price, actually explores his own experience of masking because he is also autistic, but I believe we also potentially follow some other stories across the autism spectrum and of different people's experiences. I have a neurodivergent brain. It is not an autistic brain though, and so I'm excited to learn, I'm excited to know, I'm excited to grow my knowledge. Our little stack is quite colourful. I'm a fan so far. The next space is the Daffodil Space, which is a book about friendship. And how much more friendship can we get than our most beloved, world's most popular K-pop boy band, the BTS book Beyond the Story. Now, flashback to 2016, I became an avid fan of BTS, an army, if you will. And I think that phase lasted at least 2 years of just being my entire personality. I will never forget, I'm devastated because when I found them and when I discovered who they were, they had been in Australia 2 months prior to that for a concert, and they haven't been back since. But this is like the 10-year anniversary book that follows, I think, their experience throughout their debut and their history and the conception of BTS and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, it is as authentic and behind the scenes as we can get for a book that has been curated about a band of people that was curated. But I am really, really keen to hear about the experience of, I guess, like the ins and outs of the K-pop industry from their perspective and what that journey looks like over 10 years, because I've only been in it for not that long. Oh, it's been 7. That's a long time. Wait, can I maths? Yeah, 7. 7 years. 7 years I've been a fan. The next space is the Cacti Space, and this is a book that's non-needy. You know, something that's just like a little bit easy. It doesn't take a lot of your attention, a lot of your time. This is probably my favorite space because that's my favorite kind of book at the moment. However, has she set things to be easy for herself? Nay. I have in fact given myself 2 books for this prompt, and that is volumes 4 and 5 of Lore Olympus. This is a Greek mythology graphic novel webtoon series. I read the first volumes, maybe it was last year's bloomin readathon actually, but shortly after that I just fell into the hole of reading all of them on webtoon. It took over my life, but I've fallen off since then and I'm not caught up and I don't know where we're up to. So I figured I'd jump back into these, catch up with where we're at, and then continue on. In these we follow primarily the story of Hades and Persephone. It's colourful, it can be really quite tense and serious at times, and there are some content warnings, so check those if you need to check those, but I thoroughly enjoyed the rabbit hole I fell down when I first read them, so I'm hoping that that experience repeats itself and we go again. Next is the Variegated Space, and this is a book that is rare or not as well known. I mentioned these again in my last video. I will be reading volume, what number is this? 4 of the Witch graphic novel series. Not gonna ramble on about it, but it's a magical girls series. It follows 5 girls that have powers. It was on Disney when I was a kid, quite a lot, and that's how I kind of found it to start with. And for that reason, because it is a childhood favorite, I will also be reading volume 5 for the Roots space. Next, lighting really has gone janky. It looks like it's gonna rain. The next space is the prop space, and this is the propagation space, which is a book that has been adapted into TV. I am bending the rules for this one because I'm actually switching it. I'm going a TV series that has been adapted into a book. And again, I'm making things hard for myself and reading 2 books. They are the Avatar graphic novel series and The Legend of Korra. Many disclaimers here. I don't know where these fit into anything. I don't know if I have to have other ones before I've read these ones. I don't know where they fit into the timeline of Avatar. I'm 90% sure they're both set after both of the TV shows. If you don't know, Avatar: The Last Airbender was a cartoon that was on Nickelodeon when I was a child. I once again fell in love with it. It has been a comfort rewatch ever since then. And they never continued the TV show, but they made them graphic novels that were just incredibly hard to find. Like I said, don't know where they fit in. I stumbled across them at my local Big W and I didn't know that they even existed, but I now do, and I'm very excited to read them. The next space is the Spider Space, which is the dark themes space. For this one, I'm actually listening to the Black Witch Chronicles series at the moment, so I'm going to include Shadow Wand as the book for this prompt. This is a young adult fantasy series, and I say young adult just because I think a lot of the themes aren't quite adult fantasy and it's still quite accessible for probably younger readers, but at the same time I really enjoy it because it deals with a lot of different themes that are quite serious, like racism and genocide and religion, just a lot of different heavy topics that are really quite lovely and digestible within this fantasy world. This is obviously the 3rd book in the series, so I'm not going to tell you about this one specifically, but in the first book we follow Ellerin Gardner, and she is a witch, she's a mage, and she has no powers. She was tested as a child and she has no magic. However, her grandmother is notoriously known as the Black Witch, and she was the strongest mage that the world has ever seen, and Ellerin is the spitting image exact likeness of her. The first 2 were phenomenal, so I'm thoroughly enjoying my time in the series. I have paused listening to it at the moment just because I ran out of Spotify hours to listen to the book. So I'm waiting for that to refresh, and if it does not refresh in time, then I'll just buy the audiobook so I can keep listening to it. Next is the Lotus Space, and this is the space of growing through adversity or a book that features disability. I've picked Hidden Valley Road by Robert Kolkner. I think I picked this for last year's bloomin readathon as well. I can argue probably for days about whether or not schizophrenia is a disability. I have seen it at work. It is incredibly debilitating as a mental illness. But regardless, I think the story of a family of 12 children, 6 of which get diagnosed with schizophrenia, is definitely a story of people growing through adversity. This is another nonfiction book, and it actually follows the journey. I think of this family as they're kind of followed up and assessed and investigated by a bunch of psychiatrists and doctors who are exploring schizophrenia in like the early 60s. Yeah, around the baby boom. So the oldest child was born in 1945 and the youngest in 1965. It's not through lack of wanting to read this that I haven't read it yet. I'm very, very invested and I very much enjoyed it. Tiny pea brain just didn't have the space to be able to absorb the knowledge that I needed to when I started reading it. Are we back yet? Who knows? But this is the month to find out. Next is Succulent, and this is a book that makes you hot, angry, steamy, otherwise, whatever kind of hot you feel. And for this, I will actually be listening to From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata. This is an ice skating romance, how fitting, that had a lot of hype on the TikTok for a while. That has since died down, but my desire to read the book has not. Like I said, this is an ice skating romance. We follow Jasmine as she, at the tender age of about 26, realizing that her figure skating career is kind of at a bit of a crossroads, a bit of a turning point. She can either go into coaching or she can figure out what she's doing with figure skating, or she can just give up on it and pursue the rest of her life. However, all of that changes when she gets asked by Ivan Lukov, who is kind of the poster boy of pairs figure skating, to pair with him for a year. I love ice skating. I love contemporary romances. I'm hoping I love this, but I'm listening to it because no romance should be 485 pages long. It's too much. Next is The Lily Space, and that is a book that covers grief or death. And for this one, I have picked You've Reached Sam by Dustin Tao. This feels like a spoiler, but literally I will read you the Goodreads synopsis of this. 17-year-old Julie has her future planned out. Move out of her small town with her boyfriend Sam, attend college in the city, and spend a summer in Japan. But then Sam dies and everything changes. Covers death, obviously. Covers grief, I would assume. I've had it on my TBR for a while. It's not that long. This is the month. Now is the time. I'm just gonna give us a little bit more light on this side, I think. I'm mad at the sun because yesterday was 7 o'clock before it got dark, and now it's literally only 6:15. And it is so gloomy and awful, ruining my filming. Next is The Snail Space, which is Find a Slow Burner. Need I say more? This is a bind-up of the first 4 books in the Earthsea Chronicles. I've put this on the list. I will only be expecting that I read the first one, and if the desire so takes me, I will read the rest. But this is basically a fantasy series classic. Ursula K. Le Guin wrote these a very, very long time ago. We follow a magician Ged, and it kind of tells the story about how he became the most powerful wizard in the world, I think. I picked this up because Patrick Rothfuss, who is the author of The Name of the Wind, said that it heavily inspired The Name of the Wind. Jared has already read this and he said it very much resembles The Name of the Wind, but is also very, very good. So I am excited. I have it physically and I also have the audiobook, so I haven't decided what format I might go yet. It could go either way. ¿Por qué no los dos? Then we have The Water Space, and this is read from an author you're thirsty to read more of. For this, I've picked To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. The Monk and the Robot duology is one of my favorite series of all time at this point, but I also really, really enjoyed The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet when I read that. And I think I read that one around 2019. Heavy on the Firefly vibe. So, so good. But this is a novella that she has also written. It's a sci-fi, and I think it follows the concept of if humans, when exploring space, instead of trying to terraform planets, they change themselves to fit the other planets. That's all I know, and that's all I want to know. Next, we have The Fertilizer Space, and this is a book that will nourish your soul. So many of the books I've already talked about can already cover this prompt, but for the sake of making a TBR that I can pick books from, I have also added How Do You Live? It's by Genzaburo Yoshino, and this is the book that the new Miyazaki film is based off of. He came out of retirement to write his final movie, and it's based off of this book. This was on my TBR long before that happened, and again, I spoke about it last week in my last video. If you want to go see it, go check that out. And I was trying to find a way to synopsize this in a way that made sense, but my tiny pea brain did not have the space to be able to do that, and it did not make sense, so I will simply once again read you the Goodreads synopsis, because why reinvent the wheel? So we follow Copper, and it says he's 15, who after the death of his father must confront inevitable and enormous change, including his own betrayal of his best friend. In between episodes of Copper's emerging story, his uncle writes to him in a journal, sharing knowledge and offering advice on life's big questions as Copper begins to encounter them. Over the course of the story, Copper, like his namesake, Copernicus, looks to the stars and uses his discoveries about the heavens, earth, and human nature to answer the question of how he will live. If that does not sound soul nourishing, I don't know what does. Next is Reincarnation, which is a book that has LGBTQ plus themes. For this one, I have picked a book that I am maybe reading for my IRL work book club that I have, and it is Kiss I Once for Me, which is a book that once again was very popular last year. Are you sensing a theme? This is a Christmas romance book, and it's very fitting for the time of year that we're in. And it follows Ellie, who has a meet cute on Christmas Eve with a girl in a bookstore. They fall in love across the night, and then something happens. They split, they don't talk to each other again. A year later, Ellie is offered by her coffee shop's landlord, which appears unethical, to be in a proposed fake marriage arrangement, marriage of convenience, if you will. One of the things in that is that he introduces her to his family, and who is his sister? None other than the woman that she fell in love with. Another second chance romance. How do I keep doing this to myself? Ooh, I don't have this book with me. Where is this book? Ooh. The next space is the Tulip Space, and this is a book that features love. It's a book about love, or one that you predict that you will love. I feel like, once again, many of the books on this list would fit that brief. However, I like to make things hard for myself. We have Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. Once again, it's in the title. How could it not be about love? Dolly Alderton is a British author, and this is her memoir autobiography. It's her debut novel, which I wasn't aware of until I was researching this video. And it follows Alderton's experiences growing up, learning life lessons, moving through her 20s, falling in and out of love, learning who she is and what she wants to be. This is another one of those very popular books that I've seen everywhere, so I'm rather excited to get to this one. Next, we have The Ladybug Space, which is a book that is cute on the surface but will ruin your life. I'm gonna bend the rules again because this is my TBR and I can do what I want with it. There are no rules here. I've picked Fair Play by Eve Rodsky. This is somewhat of a self-help book. I found this through a TikTok when I saw a couple having like a relationship meeting, and they had the accompanying cards that come with this book. And essentially it helps to sort out the mental load, the chore load, the housework load of making your life run. Now, how does this book fit the prompt, Michaela? I'm glad you asked. The cover, simple, lovely colors. Hate that I cannot take off the Reese's Book Club mark that is permanently embedded and a part of the cover. How will it ruin your life, Michaela? That is the real question. I am a dysfunctional human being. Brain doesn't work the way that most people's brains work. So I feel like once I read this, my life will be ruined by having to actually do all the housework and chores that I need to do in my house. Good for my brain, good for balance, but bad for how much more dysfunctional I think I'm about to realize that I am. All right, we're nearly done. Next is Earth, which is a book that takes place before or was published before 1990. For this one, I have picked Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which is like the OG fantasy sci-fi. It's the story of Frankenstein's monster. You can probably tell me the plot of this more than I know. Let's move on to the next one, which is Ivy, which is the highest rated book that you have on your shelf, or is a climber, or a highly rated book. I couldn't find an official highest rated books on Goodreads list. To be fair, I didn't try Storygraph, and I probably should have. Regardless, I picked Fourth Wing because no one that I know or have watched or have spoken to who has read this book has had anything bad to say about it. I've heard only good things, and it has a rating of 4.65 on Goodreads with 651 and 2,000 reviews, which is pretty impressive for a book that was released this or last year. Again, you probably know the story. As far as I know, it's about a school with dragons and it's a romantasy, if you will. I love me a good romantasy that is bingeable, and everyone has told me to read it. The second last space is Dandelion, which is a book that's been on your shelf for a stupidly long amount of time and you can't seem to get rid of it. We did this last year. This is the first 3 books in the Abhorsen Chronicles series. When I bought it, there was only 3 out, so this was the entire collection, but it is a gigantic book. It's written by Garth Nix. He is an Australian author, which is amazing. And in the first one, we follow Sabriel, who is, I think, at a school or is learning how to use this special magic when her father goes missing and she has to go into the Old Kingdom, which is kind of like the underworld where all of the ghosts and the dead people and the souls are, to try and save him. I've started reading it. I did try, but again, it's a behemoth. But I'm ready to make this happen. We'll see if this or Earthsea gets read first. I also have this on audiobook because I will not be lugging this around with me to try and read it. It is so unwieldy, I cannot do that. And the last space is the mole space, which is a book with a strong antagonist. And for this one I've picked Assistant to the Villain. This is by Anna Nicole Mehra and she is a TikToker. I have been following her Assistant to the Villain series that she was doing on TikTok since like COVID times. It's been a while. I did fall off, I got a bit bored, but as the title implies, this is the story of Evie who applies for the role of assistant to the morally grey fantasy villain. I've heard mixed reviews, we'll see how it goes, but I have been anticipating this one. And that's it. That's my Bloomin' Readathon TBR. Obviously, I will not be reading all of these books in November. I would love if I could read all these books in November, but I physically don't have the time for that. But I like to give myself some choice. I like to have different options, and obviously a lot of these books can cover different prompts, so we'll see how we go. Welcome to the Bloomin' Readathon. I hope that you are also enjoying the Bloomin' Readathon. It has already kicked off at this point. I'm just like a little bit late to the party, but that's not new news here on the Meekela Reads channel. Let me know if you have a TBR for the Bloomin' Readathon because I love this time of year. I love Bloomin' Readathon. It helps me to find new friends, new people who all just have lovely similar interests in books. I will leave the link to Ali's channel where all of her Bloomin' information stuff is if you would like more information about this readathon if you haven't heard of it before. I'm going to leave that here. Continue reading the books that I have already started on this list. Try to make a dent in this ambitious TBR, and I hope to see you throughout the rest of the month. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're having a fantastic day or night or whatever time it is where you are in the world, and I will see you next week for the Bloomin' Readathon. Goodbye.